Welcome to this edition of What the Fuck Happenings Here. Probably more here in Mendham. Lots to talk about what part of your brain is actually your brain. It's always annoying, in my opinion. This whole idea that we're all about this frontal crap and all the other parts don't matter much, and it's all bullshit. Anyway, changing the subject. Yeah. So I do realize that I got to do this differently, and I'm thinking about different ways of doing this. And I sort of made a series of videos, like yes or no questions, and trying to get to the idea that every argument is composed of a bunch of facts, proposed facts, a theory of truth. There's a number of steps. And once you agree on all 5 of the points, you really have to agree on the conclusion. And if you don't agree on one of the points, well, then you know exactly what you disagree about, which isn't the conclusion. It's about one of the other facts. It's like if we disagree on the subject of abortion, it's because you obviously have some fact that's different than my set of facts. Like you think fetuses feel pain or something, or something, whatever it is. You think, killing a baby pig is somehow different than killing a baby fetus. Some kind of reason to think those are different horrors taking place in the universe. And, there'd be no logical reason for that distinction. So that's where we disagree on some fact, some biological fact. Like you believe in a God who created human beings or something. Some kind of nonsense. There'd have to be some fact that we disagree on. And it'd be nice to always get to the fact that we disagree on, not always arguing the conclusion that doesn't have anything really to do with the one specific fact that's in the way. It's sort of like the Trump argument in a sense where, yes, the conclusion isn't whether Trump is a good man or Trump is even a good president. The argument was always, what's worse than Trump? And the fact that you could imagine something worse than Trump. Like you actually thought there could be something worse than Donald Trump being president. Like there's some less qualified, less decent, less logical, less sensible, less corrupt, well, more corrupt person than Donald Trump. Of course there isn't. Anyway. You couldn't make a worse choice, theoretically. I mean, really. You just can't. Can't be done. So the disagreement's not about some conclusion. It's about some fact that you're just not getting. That, he's a compulsive liar. That he's, insanely self-obsessed and all of that shit. You're just not understanding the truth. All right. More than any other possible thing that could have been running against him. There's no worse monster. Anyway, side subject, completely off the subject in a way. But anyway, the idea of doing this yes-no thing, you just ask a set of questions and try to get to an understanding of what the missing fact is. So this anti-natalist argument. So this guy, nice enough guy, whatever, plants vegetables and things, tries to be a decent human being, I think, or suspect. He generally senses that he is attempting to be a likable person or whatever. But he doesn't really have an argument. So he just ignores all the facts because he uses some black swan catch-22 nonsense that none of the facts are real facts. Like, we can't know that we evolved on planet Earth. We can't know that there wasn't, like, Bugs Bunny didn't invent us. We can't know that any cartoon story invented that's just a cartoon story, made-up story, isn't a fact that we have to consider as possible. There's no reason to. You don't just make up any fairy tale, like a 6-legged cockroach invented the universe. And I could just say, well, it has 8 legs. And I could say 10 legs. And I could just say 12. I could just go for infinity, making up stories. And they're just made up stories. There's no reason to give them the benefit of the doubt as that's a possible explanation for our existence. No, it isn't. It's nonsense. Meaningless rubbish. Not worthy of even pausing and saying, oh, let me let me give that a fair hearing. No, it's dismissible on face because there's no evidence supporting it. Zero evidence supporting it as anything other than made up shit. And so that's all his counter arguments. His counter arguments are all just made up shit about how maybe we're not just monsters created by a DNA molecule's evolution. Maybe our compulsions aren't really all negative in the sense that they're all made out of some deprivation, some negative state that we have to correct by, grabbing them by the pussy or, getting ours. What's in it for me? This kind of selfish acquisition, consumption of stuff that often would do somebody else just as good as us, like the gold medal. Gold medal would make almost anybody nice and happy to win the gold medal. Me winning it doesn't make it better. Just makes it better for me. Doesn't make the universe better. That kind of stuff. He doesn't have a counter argument for any of that. Doesn't have any counter punch. He just has, well, what if a silly fantasy story's true? That's nothing a rational person should consider. What if there's really a God and he'll be mad that you don't like his creation? Why should I spend any time giving that any credibility at all? It's just made up fantasy story. It's like saying, what if the three bears invented the universe? And they won't like that I'm criticizing their creation. I mean, it's mush. So anyway, the first, I watched a minute and 30 seconds and he's just going through a rag about how I'm supposed to put up with their insufferable nonsense. And it's just unfortunate that I just don't feel like being insulted for more than 20 minutes. Like I'll have my intelligence insulted for 20 minutes being asked idiotic, inane questions about whether I believe in a God when right there, it says do not God. So even though it says do not God right there, they asked me a silly question, insulting my intelligence, and yet they want to have some sort of friendly conversation of some kind. Yeah. Fuck you. About torture. So really, and what we're talking about is torture. Imposed torture. These people saying, we know what we're doing by having babies. We're properly qualified creators. It says right here on my penis, I'm a qualified creator. Well, yeah, I can say that, but you wrote it. Okay, it wasn't written by an authority who gave you authority. You weren't blessed by any kind of rational pope. You're just claiming a right. You're not demonstrating why you should have a right. Because you have some notion in your head, it will all be okay. Even if they're tortured, it will be okay. Because, somehow, yin yang or something. A black swan will kiss all of the torture away. Some mush. Yeah. So we'll see if he gets to the subject or not, but whatever. We'll play along, see what happens. Sorry, I have to look past the microphone.
Making it up after the fact that that's why he lost his cool, because
I didn't make anything up after the fact. I made point after salient point for 20 minutes. You responded to not a single point with any other response than, what if the three bears really existed? That's all you did. You answered with the same nonsense to every single point raised. You just said, what if there's a God, essentially? You had no response to a single point.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Conscientious Omnivore. My name is Pal. Today I'm going to be...
Well, jump ahead to the proper
It's
location.
it's an excuse, obviously. But anyway,
Yeah,
you know, I want to talk about kind of my views on anti-natalist.
good. I mean, you could have done that the whole time, right? So you see, I don't even know why did you want to have the debate except to do some kind of spectacle thing, right? Because you really didn't have it pre-thought out. You didn't have arguments laid out. You just had inane questions you were going to ask me that weren't on the subject of whether or not I think torture is a good idea. You didn't ask me that. You didn't say, well, do you think you should be able to torture somebody for your pleasure? And I would have given you the obvious answer, no. And then I could ask you, do you think it's okay? You can impose torture on things for your own personal comfort? You're allowed to? You have the authority to impose? I don't think you do.
Natalism and clear up some things, because there's a lot of comments, and I have not had time. I've been gone. I've been doing the race. You know, I haven't been able to.
You talk about excuses, so he just ended the other sentence with my excuses. Oh, that sounds like an excuse of some kind. So first you couldn't figure out how to make a video on the subject that you pretend to care about in some way. You had to do a spectacle debate where you have, you know, Homie the Clown ask questions, and then you accuse me of making excuses for why I got sick of being insulted and left. You know, I mean, amazing. And then imply that somehow, like I said, I was unwilling to have a real debate on the subject when all you have to do is point your points. You just make a video. Here's my point, and you show it to me. And you say, see, this is my point. And I can respond to it. So your Black Swan argument, for example, has been already responded to by Glenos, and he, you know, pretty much mocked it as appropriate, and pointed out that this conversation isn't about whether or not you can change a black magic marker into a brown magic marker. You know, that's not what the subject is. Whether it's possible. Oh, Jesus. The question is it possible that one of your fairy stories about some sort of something other than the story of the selfish gene, so, you know, I could rewrite the selfish gene, the Dawkins book, and just call it the homicidal serial killer gene, because that's really what it is. It throws baby birds out of the nest. It picks them up and tosses them out, you know, to get eaten on the ground. It murders them all the time. It murders things. It sets things up to be murdered. The alpha takes control, surrounds himself with the betas. The betas are the food for the lions. It's like the elk, you know, will try to poke a few little holes in each other, so the other elks are a little bit damaged by the king elf, you know, elk. And so now they'll be the wolf food, because, you know, they got a sore leg, or they got a bruise on their head. So it's a kind of insidious murder all over the place. I set you up to catch fire, and then I cook a marshmallow on your cinders. Anyway, the point is your fairy story compared to that real story is the real subject. Douche.
Go through all those comments, and there's just tons and tons of stuff that I've seen in there that are very inaccurate, and I just want to clear things up, and also kind of you know, actually state my position, because I didn't get to do it in a debate format. And obviously what I talked about...
Yes, you had 20 minutes to chime in and say, hey, wait, Homie the Clown, quit asking idiotic questions. Why don't you actually talk about like the asymmetry or some kind of real subject? Or why don't you actually answer one of the points he raises? Why do you keep copping out and saying shit like, well, what if there is a God? Well, what if there is a God?
With Logan was more about kind of what happened, and we talked about what he presented, not my own views necessarily, or not fully, anyway, not fully explained. So that's what I want to do today. And yeah, I just got some notes here that I want to follow. So yeah, basically, you know, what I want to state up front is that, you know, I've I've got several videos about kind of like religious topics on my channel. If anybody hasn't seen that, you can definitely.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's already a big loser. Okay, that's zero credibility. So yeah, you're done if you're saying there's any reason to believe any of those fairy stories. They're all just fairy stories. Zero evidence supporting any of them. Totally overwhelmed by the volumes of evidence supporting the theory that we evolved on planet Earth from, more rudimentary organisms. And the fact is, our ancestors were fish. We were fucking fish. Okay? Yes, we fucked fish, but I'm just saying we were fish. Fucking.
You look through them, and I actually want this channel to be as inclusive as possible, and I don't bring religion into the topic of veganism. The point of this channel is to introduce as many people as possible.
I mean, how the fuck would you even do that anyway? I mean, it really can't make any sense unless you do some sort of King David said don't eat pigs. I mean, basically, a literal reading of the Bible is going to be pretty clear that the animals are here for our abuse. I mean, fuck, slaughtering them on the altar of the god. I mean, come on. In particularly horrible ways to please God. Their suffering makes God happy. It's disgusting.
To the idea of veganism and make it as attractive as possible, because I think it's a better, more ethical, healthier, more sustainable, more morally correct way to live.
Yeah, well, it's always the last one, right? The more morally correct. All the other crap first before you get to the morally correct, which would be ethically decent or ethically rational approach, is to recognize that causing harm for your own comfort or convenience unnecessarily, in the sense that you don't need to do it. You can adjust your diet pretty easily without compromising too much of your comfort. Yes, you do that. You prevent torture with a minor inconvenience. Yes.
And that's, my intention is to basically get as many people to that side of, the thinking or whatever as possible. And I think...
Yeah, getting people to do the right thing for the wrong reason is a dead end, in my opinion. Especially when this cause doesn't really mean anything, in the sense of the tiny fraction of the animal suffering caused by human beings is just that, a tiny, tiny fraction. And what they need to understand is that we are living in this horrible meat grinder of a system, and that it is consuming preposterous amounts of suffering to feather our nest, so to speak, our bed that we're lying in of we're great. Our we're great bed is made out of a biosphere that suffers a lot, so we can breathe air.
A lot of the kind of charges that are leveled at vegans are typically like, well, you're getting your food imported and all this kind of stuff, and you're hurting the environment regardless, and killing the bugs and the insects.
Well, again, another irrational statement, because the food that is fed to the animals is the same kind of vegetarian food. So you have to spend less, you have to make less food on planet Earth if you just eat the vegetables and don't waste them on the animals. So feeding the animals takes many more times amounts, many-fold amounts of energy and actual fertilizer and dead insects and dead mice and all this stuff that gets killed to create vegetables. Vegetables are fed to the farm animals. So again, just take out the farm animals, you take out their suffering, plus you'll need to grow less just to feed us instead of growing the flesh. You're growing less, you'll be responsible for producing less flesh, because you'll just be producing human flesh. You'll just be feeding the human flesh. So you're taking a whole big part of the energy cycle out of the game by not wasting it making animal flesh. So that argument's completely irrational and easily defeated, quite obviously.
And that's why I'm trying to create my own food forest. That's why I'm trying to push that gardening aspect of things as much as possible to people, because I think that is ultimately the most, kind of like ethically sourced food that you can possibly have, is stuff that you...
Well, when you do it your own growing, actually, it's less efficient because you need more pesticides, and it takes more fertilizer and it takes more everything. There's economies in scale. And just like it's true that mass production is more efficient, it's true in this case also in the production of food. It's more efficient to create food on a large scale farm than it is small farms. Small farms are less efficient, not more efficient.
Grown out of your backyard without the use of chemicals, without the use of pesticides, without killing bugs, without killing mice, all this kind of stuff. And if you create a good ecosystem, as I've said in many of my videos, I really believe that you can achieve that and still have, some left over and not...
Yeah, I don't think as a practical matter you can, unless you're willing to spend many hours a day maintaining that garden, picking the bugs off individually and all of that crap. It's really hard to produce enough food to feed even yourself.
Be greedy and not have to take all of the fruits of your labor and leave some for the birds, leave some for the rodents. Like it's totally fine. There's going to be enough there for everybody. You don't have to kill off all the pests, quote unquote. They just want to live too. So anyway, if anybody hasn't seen any of those videos,
they just want to live what kind of life? A 40-day life going through a bunch of metamorphoses and life cycles that may in fact just be torturous. You have no idea. You don't know what metamorphosis feels like, what it feels like to be a praying mantis and shed your skin 3 times. Might be torture.
But definitely look through those. You'll see my stance pretty clearly. To get back to the religious topic, I think, the point of doing those videos is not to tell people to be religious. If you are religious, that's great. If you're not religious, that's great too. My point is you can be...
Yeah, it's like saying being retarded is great. It's not great. If you're not doing rationality right, if you're not collecting facts rationally and weighing them rationally, you should point that out to people in their own interest that you're quite irrational. You're giving this one fable a huge amount of credibility when there's all this competing fables that have exactly the same amount of evidence, and you're only accepting yours because it's in English and your mommy believed it. You don't have any special evidence that it's the truth. You just think it's the truth because, well, Grandma believed it, so I'm going to believe it. It's a silly answer. It's a silly reason for a fundamental philosophical component of your identity and your understanding of reality. So you're taking a fundamental component and putting it in your story, your personal narrative, for completely irrational, subjective, childishly silly reasons. Because it's a cute idea, because it's familiar, because it's the same kind of spaghetti your mommy cooked. I mean, it's a silly reason to believe.
Moral or immoral, whether or not you are religious, whether or not you believe that there is a God or there isn't a God, or there are gods, or whatever you want to believe in. The point of Logan's question to it.
So again, that's just absolutely silly that this is somehow an inconsequential, fundamental understanding of what it's to be a thinking being in this universe, a biological organism that has the capacity to collect and organize knowledge, and you're basically filling it with a pile of fucking shit. You're feeding your brain actual shit. You're opening your skull and smearing shit on your head, closing the door. You're just fucking any hope of having a clue what it is to be alive.
Mendham was certainly not to try to convince him of there being a God or not being a God. I think he rightfully demanded that in Mendham present proof of his belief, because unlike
Again, proof beyond what besides my capacity to reason? I have zero evidence for one fable, zero, and it's even silly to boot. Okay, so there's no evidence supporting it, and it's fucking silly. And then I have a theory that's piles and piles of evidence, and it's perfectly consistent with everything I see about human behavior, our conduct, the way the world works, everything that's turned out. It's obviously, the truth is that it is sloppy, that this sausage making is ugly as fuck, and it has nothing to do with this silly fable.
what a lot of people are kind of screaming on about in the comments, the point wasn't Logan's to make, and he was not telling Inmendham that he needs to prove that there are no such thing as leprechauns or whatever in order for his point to be valid. It's quite the opposite. Inmendham is actually like really like guilty of this, and all of
what a pile of shit, whatever this statement's going to be. What I did in 20 minutes was make lots of salient points about kids on tight ropes, about knives sticking up and nets, and the idea of your imposition. I used all these words. I pointed out how you're the aggressor. You're the one claiming you know what you're doing, even though you're saying to me, I'm not allowed to know what I'm doing because I can't prove there's no God. So until I prove that there's no three bears living in some forest somewhere, you know, wearing hats and smoking peeps, until I prove those bears don't exist, I somehow can't believe anything. That was your argument, even though you're the one asserting that you're qualified to make creation products, that you're a Dr. Frankenstein who knows what they're doing. And you don't have any evidence that you know what you're doing. You have absolutely nothing to demonstrate that you're qualified to impose torture on anything, to push anything onto a tightrope, to ever think that pushing things onto tight ropes would be a good thing to do with your fucking scurvy life. I made plenty of points. You didn't respond to a single fucking one of them. Except one where you said, I never thought of that. Yeah, that was the one point you made in response to any of the points I made. I never thought of that. Well, that's part of the problem. You haven't done much thinking.
his videos that I've seen, what he will do is basically stop people. You know, I think that's why he doesn't do well in the live debates, because he can't stop people.
Say another pile of shit. What live debate haven't I done well in? Show me, point to the conversation I've ever had that I didn't prevail in the conversation. So another silly premise, another overt lie. The whole reason why you challenged me to the debate isn't because I'm a bad debater, retard. Clearly you did it because I'm a notoriously successful debater. Eesh, you're just so fucking full of shit.
Because he just comes across as being extremely rude, which he is, and incredibly arrogant. But when he plays back people's videos, he can just...
Right. Now, it's quite obvious that the conversation would have been perfectly civil if Happy the Clown would have actually been a human being, all right, and presented something like a real conversation instead of this idiotic conversation of, I'm just going to keep asking you to prove there's no God. Why would I take that for more than 20 minutes? Why would I sit around for more than 20 minutes listening to somebody keep saying, well, you haven't proven there's no God yet. Well, you haven't proven my fantasy story is a lie. That's not my obligation.
Stop them and then interject all sorts of crazy stuff on top of it that has nothing to do with what the person said. Totally distract.
Again, this never took place. You won't find a single clip in the video where I did any of that. So just lie, you fucking liar. Yeah, I'm the rude one. You lie compulsively and overtly, and then tell me I'm the rude one? No, lying is rude, asshole. Newsflash. If you haven't figured that fucking out yet, lying is rude, and you just lied.
The viewer into some other realm of thing, and then try to put words in the mouth, so to speak, of the person making their point. And
there was no words in your mouth. The words came out of your own mouth. He kept saying, you can't prove there's no God, and you kept saying, well, there's this black swan problem that, sometimes people think there's something isn't exist, and it does exist. And therefore, because it happened once, it happens all the time and every time. So every time something happens, you have to well, if I think there's paper and somebody has the theory that there's anti-paper, well, then there has to be anti-paper, because that's the way it always works out. If I think there's just paper and there's no anti-paper, somewhere somebody's going to find the anti-paper eventually. Like a black swan, it's just going to show up out of nowhere. Oh, there's anti-paper, see? So you can't believe in anything. I can believe in things. Okay, I can believe in having kids, and I can believe I'm competent, and I can believe I can make all their boo-boos go away, and even if they get cancer and die when they're 6 years old, it'll still be just fun and great. I can pretend all of that, but you can't. Yeah, I can pretend, but you can't. You're just such a fucking hypocrite.
That's what he tried to do there too, and he's screaming on and on about leprechauns and what have you. The point is,
yeah. What's the difference between a leprechaun and Mohammed or Jeebus or Buddha or any of this bullshit? What is the difference between a leprechaun and any of these little fables? Do you think Buddha really talked to death, and that death explained in the end, well, the secret to life is to jump into a fire and then you won't have to come back as a cow or anything? You think that really happened, fuckhead? Idiot. Retard. Jesus.
And that Logan was trying to say, you should believe in leprechauns, and that's why you should have babies, because the great leprechaun in wherever leprechaun land is telling you that you should.
No, it has nothing to do with the subject. He was saying I can't rule out that evolution isn't the truth. That somehow I can't rule out all the fable stories being the actual truth. That the universe is somehow running on something else, like maple syrup. Okay, it's not the selfish gene. It's the magical, wonderful, happy gene. That there's some other truth here than the obvious truth that we are descendant from fucking fish that crawled out of the fucking water, became little mud skippers, okay, and then started being little salamanders, and then we're other little walking creatures, and that we actually are descendant quite directly to those organisms. That's the history of our existence as a fact. And there's no wooey God that made any of it, and it doesn't have any wooey magical purpose. And as I did point out in the 20-minute video, the 20 minutes I gave you fuckers of my valuable time, I pointed out that this is a pretty grisly story, that most of the children are murdered. Most of the children born on Earth, the children of the mature organisms, the children mammals, most of them are killed as children. And you think that's a great story. I think it sucks as a story.
Have millions of babies, and that's how you'll be happy. And then, in Mendham is saying that's crazy to believe in leprechauns, and there is no great leprechaun, and blah, blah, blah. No, it's quite the opposite. And Mendham has a view that because there's no God, therefore, it is just a sick, twisted, kind of random...
Yeah, it's evolution. No, I don't believe that it's some twisted thing. I believe it's evolution. And if you take evolution for what it actually is, not just the selfish gene, but the homicidally ignorant, stupid fucking gene that will kill you and probably kill you badly. That's the kind of gene it is. It doesn't care about your suffering. It doesn't understand your suffering. It can't pay attention to it because it can't even recognize it. It doesn't care how much torture it makes. It only cares about creating winners and lots of losers. And you like that game. You think that game is logical. I think it's insanely illogical.
Series of events that has brought us to our existence, and that therefore, he's going to try to somehow fix this because it's sort of a mistake. It's some...
Yes, evolution is a crude, dumb force that squanders suffering in preposterous volumes, and anybody who endorses it is a sick motherfucker. You're a psychotic kook if you acknowledge the fact that it mass murders children in horrible, disgusting Freddy Nightmare, disgustingly torturous ways, and you're saying it's oh fucking K. That makes you just as bad. It makes you worse. Nature doesn't have the sense to know better. We do have the sense to say, fuck, I'm not going to be part of Freddy's nightmare. I'm not going to feed Freddy. I'm not going to endorse Freddy for president. I'm not going to do anything to help him murder and torture. Fuck.
Thing that should never have happened. So it's his assertion that there is no God, and it's his assertion that he's 100. Well, I mean, in the debate, he said he's 100% sure. As many people in the comments said, most atheists will say that they're not 100% sure.
Yeah, well, that's their defect. That's their retardation. If you're not 100% sure the three bears don't exist, you're one dumb motherfucker. Okay, if you can't do that 100% and say, I know there's no gingerbread village with witches in the oven. I know it doesn't exist. There's no Wonkaville with little, whatever they were called, wonkiettes, wonking around making chocolate bars. For fuck's sake, if you can't say I'm 100% sure that's not reality, then you're a fucking idiot.
Again, this is neither here nor there, but he's the one who's making the assertion that there is no God. He's basing his ideas on this assertion. So it should be a valid question to say, well, how are you coming to this statement that there is no God? And
because there's absolutely no evidence, and the theory that there would be a God who created a child molesting and murdering system would be silly. Why would a God create wasted torture? That's retarded. You don't understand? Yes, if your theory is a brick is God, okay, then I'll say that might be a viable explanation. A brick did it. But unless you're going to make it a fucking brick, your story is insensibly silly. It's worse than, Bugs Bunny invented the universe.
He has no real proof for it other than the fact that it's just such a random, series of things that there's no way that it could be that planned out and
No, it's no way something intelligent would make something stupid. Intelligent things don't murder children. Intelligent things don't, for the fun of the winner circle, pick up their children and toss them out of nests. Okay? Intelligent things don't make wasteful systems. Intelligent things don't put solar panels on roofs because it's a totally ineffective way to maximize the efficiency of the technology. That kind of thing. Intelligent things don't do stupid, dumbass. That's what makes it theoretically impossible.
He's bringing all sorts of things like intention into it, like if you were a god, would you set up this kind of world and whatever? Again, if there is a god...
that didn't come up in the debate, so that's horseshit, I think. I don't think that exact argument came up in the debate. I just dismissed God as a silly fable, like any other silly story. It's no better than I have just as much evidence of Jehovah as I have evidence of Little Red Riding Hood. There's no evidence. They're just stories told by idiots.
You don't have to believe in it or not, but could it be conceivable that maybe that God has some kind of knowledge or, understanding of the way things are or should be that is a little bit more advanced than ours, and maybe things are pretty good the way they are?
Oh, yeah, right. So we're supposed to believe that this fundamental sensation of pain and suffering and torment and torture, we don't fully understand how much fun it really is. We're not getting what a great time it is to be burned to death under a gas truck, or to find out you have ALS, or any of the other crap that's going to happen to you. You're going to get killed someday in probably some kind of crappy way. And you really think, my God has a beautiful plan for me. Yes, 3 years of chemo. I can't wait. Fuck you. Stupid. Stupid.
I don't know. And again, like it's just incredibly arrogant to state like.
Again, he's the one playing Dr. Frankenstein and calling other people arrogant. He's the one saying, I'm qualified to create feeling things and to set up a game for them to play where they get bounced around on the pinball machine and at any moment they could be exploded and destroyed. They can be annihilated by all kinds of serial killers could molest them and all kinds of shit can happen to them and I can't protect them from any of that shit, but I'll throw them into the game to have the fun of playing. You're probably going to lose, sucker, because that's what most people do. They get fat asses and fat brains and they lose in life. That's how the average human being, again, you would make the average human. If I could draw the average human, he will look like Homer Simpson. You think making more of that is a good idea because you're fucking stupid.
No, and clearly, you know, and you're the one who has to kill the lions and whatever. It's like, no, man, that's not how it works. Like, you're the one.
Oh, yeah, no, that's exactly logically how it works. If you're going to defend something, then somebody has the right to say, well, let me see you do it. You do the killing. We have to stop Adolf Hitler. Well, if you don't have the guts to say you'll do it, you'll shoot the soldiers, you'll kill the 19-year-old guy coming across the line at you. If you don't have the guts to say you're willing, then you'd be a hypocrite. So the whole point is, I'm just pointing out that, well, if you think it's worth it, if you think having lions is worth killing 9 little cubs, 8 little cubs, to continue their existence. So for every pair of lions, you got to kill 8 little cubs. You got to stab them to death and drown them to death and just punch them to death. You got to kill them in all kinds of brutal ways, tormenting them, tearing their arms and legs off, their little paws, their little limbs. You have to rip them to pieces. You have to do it. So I'm demonstrating you're such a glaring hypocrite, just like the hypocrites who eat meat and say, well, I don't think it's nice, but it's okay as long as I hire it done. You would point out how, isn't that hypocrisy? You're saying somehow it's too disgusting for me personally to do it, but I think it's okay to do it? That's insane. That's just like me saying, okay, I don't want to molest children, but it's okay if somebody molests them for me. It's fucking insane hypocrisy. Douche, you're such a douche.
And making the assertion, and then you're putting words in the other person's mouth, trying to make them seem like they're the ones who are crazy, to tell you that, like, you have to prove something ridiculous like leprechauns don't exist. No.
Again, so he just changed the subject, didn't he? So he was right on the good subject, which was, how am I not a hypocrite? So why didn't you explain how you're not a hypocrite? To say, when I challenge you and say, would you kill the 9 cubs to have lions? Would you, if you had to inject the cancer into all the kids that are going to get cancer, because they're the price of having kids without cancer. To have kids without cancer, you have to have kids with cancer. Do you have the courage to be the God that you want to play? You want to play God. Would you have the courage to inject those kids with the cancer? No, I don't think you do. So if you really had to pay for this game, if you really had to pay to play, that is, you had to do your share of the killing, you don't have the guts to do it. You don't have the will to do it. You don't have the means to do it. You don't have the confidence to do it. So quit playing this game like you think it's okay. It's only okay because nature's doing your killing for you. You don't have to do it. It's doing it for you. You cop-out, sell-out weasel. You're just hiring it done. I didn't make the unfairness. I just kept putting quarters in the unfairness machine. That's all you're doing. You're saying the machine did it. Yeah, I kept feeding quarters into it. That's all you're doing. There's a machine called child molesting. And you're sitting there saying, I'm against child molesting. And you're putting quarters in it. Fuck.
You know, I didn't even want to talk about God. So anyway, that's just that. my thing is this.
Well, then you should have broke in somewhere as the moderator and said, you know what? I'm pretty sure Mendham doesn't want to talk about God because he just made it clear in the first sentence here, I don't want to talk about God. And so let's change the subject to annihilism instead. Maybe you should have broke in. Fucknut. Asshole.
He's, as far as I can understand it, and this is why I wanted to clarify, because I don't think all the antinatalists all believe the same thing. But as far as I understand it, Mendham does believe in Benatar's logic, which is the asymmetry between pleasure and pain.
Yes, it's one of the arguments, and I already called it a zero-sum game, so I have a different definition of the asymmetry, but it's the same argument. You're not going to win anything in this game. You're just fixing your holes, so to speak. So we're born into the world in need, with holes, with deprivations, with absences, and we spend the rest of our life trying to fill the fucking empty spots. And that's all we do. And if we did it perfectly, in the end, we just win being unnegative. We don't actually make positives. We just clean up the negatives. That's all we're doing here. So there is no real victory. You're just climbing out of quicksand that you should have never been in the first place. Asshole. Of course it feels good to climb out of the quicksand. But you should never have been in it in the first place.
And there is kind of this this statement. I'm going to just read through it because I don't want to mess it up. So he says, David Benatar says, the presence of pain is bad. That's number one. I would argue with this right off the bat because not all pain is bad. Pain protects you and keeps you safe from
again, irrelevant. Irrelevant. It's not about consequences. So everybody can make those arguments. You could always say the pain of the vaccine injection, you know, or something else. There's clearly, in and of itself, events and events that have consequences that prevent more pain. So obviously the idea of prevention of more pain would be worth pain. So even like for a sadomasochist, even for somebody who likes masticating themselves, the argument would be is they're already in pain, all right, a certain amount of pain. They get a relief from the pain they're in by manipulating pain, by controlling new pain. They gain relief from the existing pain. So they're always trading more for less. And clearly trading more for less, that is torturing one person to save 10 million people from torture, would of course make sense. But you would never say the one person being tortured is a good thing. So if I have one person over here who gets all the pain that every human being ever feels, I've converted into just one person's suffering, right? But the point is that suffering good? No, it's good that I've taken away all this other pain, but it's bad still that one person is in pain. So you know, this idea that you're making the pain okay, no, you're not, in the sense that you're not changing the character of the torture. You're just changing the character of its capacity to prevent greater torture. So yes, preventing greater torture is worth torture, all right? But that doesn't make the torture good. So false start right away.
When you put your hand on the fire, that's pain. It's telling you, hey, dude, pull your hand away. That's good. So it's like, this is...
What good is the pain of your tumor, your cancer tumor? What good is the migraine pain? What good? There's millions of pains that don't have any redeeming value. Most of them don't. And even these ones you think are helpful aren't really helpful in most cases. That's why we invented morphine.
Just an oversimplified statement, but I don't want to even like nitpick it because it's kind of like semantics at that point. But okay, so let's give it to it, but I'm going to caveat that already is, I think, kind of a silly statement. Next.
Okay, he thinks it's silly to recognize that pain is always a bad thing. good can come of it, but the pain itself is always bad. So he thinks that's silly. Because he's stupid!
Next statement. The presence of pleasure is good. Well, again, can you think of an example where pleasure is actually bad? Yeah, like maybe a drug overdose.
Why would that be bad? What, is the person who dies of the drug overdose going to cure cancer? Oh no, that's very highly unlikely. There's very little redeeming value, and they're put out of their misery. They don't have to take drugs anymore. So in very many ways, it's a perfectly good thing. But regardless, the point isn't to make these silly arguments in this narrow view. The argument being made is the sensation of pleasure is intrinsically itself fundamentally good. It's unnegative. It's an improved state of being. Whether it has good consequences on the total planet is another question. The question is it like if Adolf Hitler is eating birthday cake and he's enjoying it, is that enjoyment a good thing in and of itself? A brain being satisfied is a good thing. A brain being tormented is a bad thing. That's the simple argument that you're now perverting into some other statement. Benatar is simply saying, as a fundamental sensation, pain is negative. As a fundamental sensation, pleasure is positive. Duh, duh, duh.
The immediate high is good, but what it leads to is bad. So again, you can just say that this is not 100% accurate, but let's just go with it. Next thing, the absence of pain is good, even if that good is not enjoyed by anyone. Now again,
yes, the prevention of bad. So now you're stopping torture. Fundamentally, if this doesn't have any other consequence, like this isn't the one guy you torture to save 1 million people, so his torture is not going to save 1 million people, and you're stopping his torture. Good thing. Stopping torture, stopping brains from experiencing torment, extreme, horrible anguish and suffering is a good thing. So any place you can stop something from suffering, stop it from being harmed more, it's good to do that. That's plus for your behavior. Plus. Now, consequences, yes, can be different. Worldwide consequences. But we're just talking about the basic, where the money is made, not how much debt is in the economy or something. We're just talking about the coinage, the value. The origin of the value is in the conscious experience. And it's a good thing to prevent a pain that doesn't need to exist. Always a good thing.
I would argue with this because the next thing that he says is that the absence of pleasure is not bad unless there is somebody for whom this absence is a deprivation.
And it's merely acknowledging the fact that all of our pleasures are essentially made out of satisfied deprivations, which is essentially saying if you don't make any holes, you don't have to fill them in. So the absence of hole filling is good because there's no holes. You don't have a hole. You don't have to, there's no negative being satisfied. So if I don't create the hole, I don't have to fill the hole. Simple enough argument. Isn't that simple enough? Not making the problem solves the problem.
Now, obviously, it's like if you're taking away the pleasure that someone is kind of expecting to get, then that...
Yeah, well, the whole point is exactly, there's nobody expecting anything. There's no need. You're not making a need for satisfaction. Therefore, satisfaction can have zero value. Satisfaction only has value if something is dissatisfied first. So if I don't make anything dissatisfied, I have no obligation to value satisfaction. It means nothing. So I'm not losing anything if I don't have any deprivation to cure. If I don't have to cure a disease, I don't have to make a vaccine. It's just that easy. If there's no disease, there's no vaccine necessary. So vaccines would be a waste of time. So you can't hold vaccines up and say, look how valuable these vaccines are that we're losing. Well, I don't need any vaccines. All the diseases are cured.
That is bad because you're depriving them of it. And what he's saying in the absence of the pain is being good. But he's saying that that's also the case even if there's nobody who's enjoying the absence of the pain. Now, I don't think that those two things...
Clearly, prevention is good. So I'm just saying, clearly, no torture is good. So you've gotten rid of the torture, and the price you paid to get rid of the torture was you lost the joy, right? But the joy doesn't have any meaning unless there's somebody who needs it. And if there's nobody to need it, it doesn't have any intrinsic value. So the point being made is that most goods are really just made out of corrected bads. You're just fixing something that's broken. You're climbing out of the quicksand. That's the reward. That's the good thing. So I gave you this analogy in the video, I think in the 20 minutes. I think I pointed out how the game is whip and there is no carrot. You just take the whip away and you think you've been rewarded. You think you're winning. So the negative went away, I'm winning. It's not a positive. There's no positive in the game. There's just eliminating the negative. The negative's the only thing that has value. The torture has value. The satisfaction only has value because you made something being tortured. The tortured victim needs relief. So relief is all you're playing for. And you don't need relief. If you don't stick the nails in his eye, you don't need to pull them out. For fuck's sake. That's how simple the asymmetry argument is. All the value is in the negative cards. There are no positive cards. There's just reducing your negatives. There's reducing your liabilities. Period. There's only bills. There's no assets. So you win by eliminating the bills.
Go together. He's using like one logic to explain one event, and then he's coming to the opposite conclusion with the It's
not opposites. That's the whole point. I mean, you don't get it. So if I prevent torture, okay, that's not a real good. All right? And if and the truth is, if I prevent joy, but I never created somebody who needs it, that somehow that's a real bad. So if the Martians don't exist and they're not having their joy, that's somehow a real bad. So you actually believe that every single planet needs to have the maximum possible carrying capacity of sentient organisms on it, or we're somehow allowing bad to happen. Bad that equals torture. So you think it's just like torture for there not to be Martians eating candy bars. So because there's no Martians eating candy bars, that's the same as a planet covered with tortured organisms. Not even close. Not even close to the truth. And that's the asymmetry. Dummy. Stupid. Fuckhead. Dumbass.
Reciprocal of it. That's not how things work. So
yeah, it is.
Right off the bat, I think that's just kind of like a fundamental problem with what I see. And
like maybe it's a problem, like I don't like yeah, you really thought about it. So again, explain to me how it's bad that the Martians aren't enjoying the fun they're being prevented from having. Where the universe, by not making them, has prevented them from having joy, satisfaction. And it's so valuable that you sit around thinking about it and going, oh, that's like torture. Tons and tons of torture. It's equal to torture not to have Martians, diddling each other's anuses and stuff.
He has not explained this. So anyway, he tried, in his reply video to me, well, it wasn't to me, but it was to the debate. He played through certain sections of it, and he kind of tried to twist my words around. And you can watch that if you want, but you'll see that he's basically...
Yeah, just plays your goddamn tripe and responds to it with a rational fucking interpretation and shows how you're a dumb motherfucker. You lying little piece of Weasley shit.
not understanding what I'm saying there. So anyway, I don't think this is a good starting point, and I would already argue with this just in and of itself as being kind of the base.
I think I've just blown your little bullshit to bullshit land, okay? It's blown up and gone. Your argument is idiotic. To think there's a value equation with an equal sign between torture and candy bar joy is fucking retarded. No equal sign involved, therefore huge asymmetry.
Basis on what he builds up his argument on, but let's move on from there, because again it's just kind of like semantics. I'm just going to say, for the sake of this argument and for the sake of this video, let's just accept these as they are and move on. The next thing, he says that
retarded statement to make. Let's just accept it and move on. Again, your notion that okay, unfun having Martians is losing that is a lot more precious than losing Martians with cancer. Yeah, fuck you. You're an idiot.
If he got shot in the back of the head with a .44 caliber or whatever he said, and he wouldn't feel any pain, then that's fine. That's not immoral. Now, I would absolutely argue with that and say that that is immoral. You cannot take somebody's life.
By what stupid rule? Again, it just doesn't make any sense. If the only thing that's valuable, and I would argue it is the only thing that's valuable, is this satisfaction thing you were talking about, this joy thing, and this idea of torture. If those are the only two things really on the table, how is the end of your existence in a millisecond, completely, you don't even know what happened, how could you possibly create into that some sort of value crime? It's only a social contract crime. There's no the universe shed a tear because you got shot in the back of the head. Like there's some real value you could write on the table and say this is the real value lost. Now clearly if I was going to cure cancer or something, there could be a value lost. But let's just assume I'm like every other Homer Simpson dumphead and I'm going to probably consume more than I'm going to produce. And so you can't really make a rational argument that there's something going to be missing. I'm not going to create any greenhouse gases to destroy the planet. I mean, what are you saying is the value here? There isn't any. So it's just mush. I'd like it to be true that it would matter. But the truth is it doesn't matter on the value table. It can only matter because I'm a person saying smart things and we need more people in the world saying smart things. So it could be important that I live. But that could be the only rationale outside of just some kind of silly social contract where we've agreed you're a shithead, you should live, I'm a shithead, I should live. I mean, that's just a social contract. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't have any rational integrity. It's just a silly agreement between two criminals. Let's not kill each other. Pfft. We both suck. We're both scum. But somehow the world's going to be better off with us. Wrong answer.
Who wants to live and who has no, like sickness or ill health or wants to die. Like, I'm not talking about assisted suicide or, somebody's like very, very severely mentally ill or totally...
Again, but you're not rationally recognizing consequences and circumstances again. What would you be preventing happening? What if all you're preventing is a slow, miserable death they'll experience? 3 years from now, I could get cancer and I could slowly die. If somebody shoots me in the head now, I'd be much better off. So you can make the argument that unless you're saying there's something in this life that's meaningful, that's going to make the condo a better place, that I'm going to start cleaning up and I'm going to fix the timeshare, I'm going to put a new roof on it, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, then you can make an argument that my life has some value. But again, the very act of just ending lives doesn't have any meaning outside of the description of the value lost. And the value is always going to be, would you have cured cancer? What have you caused? What do you call, if you lived, would you have caused the termination of torture? That's really going to be the only equation. How much torture did you prevent? Period. That's it. There's nothing else that really has any value here. How much pain and suffering did you prevent? That's the only thing that's going to matter in the end.
You know, incapacitated. I'm not talking about that. He was talking about he's walking on the street and somebody walks up to him and shoots him in the back of the head. That's a completely different thing. And if you think of,
I was just making the simple argument that the only thing that has value is whether I'm harmed by pain and suffering. That's the only way you can harm me. Eesh.
About it, this is already like a huge logical fail and moral inconsistency from his position. He says that he's vegan. He says that he's vegan because he recognizes that the suffering of the other, sentient being is just like his own. He recognizes the moral worth of the other sentient being just as...
The moral worth doesn't mean anything. Their welfare matters. So if I could kill them instantly with no pain, no harm, I would. Because they're better off dead than being subjected to torture. True. You think you do cats a favor by cutting their nuts off and throwing them back on the streets to get run over. I think that's retarded. I think when you have them anesthetized, you should just let them go all the way to sleep. But you're not doing them any favor by throwing them back on the street to die again. Oh, it's just so without their nuts.
His own, just as he has moral worth and he wouldn't want something done to himself. But if you think about what people argue against vegans, they say there's humane slaughter. You take the cow in and you shoot him in the head with the stun gun. He doesn't know what's going on in the ideal world.
Well, obviously they panic before that happens plenty of times. But clearly the life is what's the problem with the most of the slaughter of animals isn't the last minute on Earth. It's their whole life getting to that last minute is full of abuses, full of indignities and pains that are imposed, rings in their nose and all kinds of shit.
Well, of course we know that that's not true because they sense it and they smell it and there's death and blood and just horrible like fear all around them. So we know, but in the ideal meat eater like world, you think you can bring the cow into some magical room and they don't even know what's going on and all of a sudden boom, they're dead. Like even if that were the case, vegans argue that that's wrong because that...
Well, they would be idiots too, in my opinion. Okay, if they're worried about killing cows, they're not getting the point. The point isn't about killing cows. The point is about raising cows in miserable conditions and horrible conditions and imposing great squalor and crowding and filth and always walking around their own shit and pee and shit like that. That's what the problem is. The problem is how they're treated and tortured before you give them their graceful exit.
The cow still wanted to live. The cow didn't want to die. He didn't consent to you killing him. And
again, nobody consented to the creation. So again, this idea of consent is absolute bullshit. And this idea that the cow has some understanding of life and death is just too fucking idiotic for words. The only thing the cow wants is comfort. And the truth is, it's going to be made comfortable by death. So its being dead is going to be better than its life alive. True. Really true.
There was nothing wrong with him. He wasn't unhealthy. He wasn't in pain. And you just killed him because you wanted to eat him.
We're all unhealthy and we're all in pain. So it's just nonsense. We're all dying right now. We're in the process of degrading and dilapidating. And the same thing was happening to the cow. His life was essentially ruined. You ever look at little cows and you see how they're happy and they bounce around and their eyes are wide open and they're perky and they look intelligent even and they seem like they're really in the game? That's because they're feeding on their mother's milk. And as soon as they have to become grass eaters, their brain just shuts off and they just start going grass, 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 grass. Yeah. And that's no life at all. That's being sentenced to a prison.
again, even what he said as his own example against, like killing himself, like that's already morally inconsistent with his argument for like veganism. So that's just
it's idiotic. Again, couldn't give a shit about how long something lives, all this other bullshit. All that matters is the quality of the life, the quality of the experiences. I just really couldn't give a rat's ass about this whole idea that somehow matters whether you live this much or this much or this much or this much. I mean, we're all not sitting around going, oh, fuck, I can't believe I won't live 1,000 years. Oh, fuck, it's the most tragic, horrible, blah, 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 blah. No. It's just all relative mush. It doesn't mean anything. It just doesn't. Mice live 3 stinking years. 3. And they have a completely real life. It happens. Then it's only 3 years long.
Fail right there. Other thing, that we actually pointed out in the kind of aftermath of when he left, there could be people who miss him. There could be other people like ancillary, suffering that.
All babble. And there could be people I would have murdered. There could have been people I might have raped. There could be people that I ran over with my car drunk. There could be people I pretended to love and I didn't really love them and I broke their little hearts. All kinds of crap could have been. It has, again, nothing to do with the real equation of what's the real substance that makes value. And the only thing that has substance here are these feelings. They're the only thing that have any value or meaning. All the thoughts and all the other crap is just rubbish. The only thing that really means anything is what did you actually feel while you were alive. But anyway, this is going on, so we'll leave it here for now. Maybe I'll get back to it, maybe I won't. But yeah, you're an idiot. And you're rude. Fuck you. And you're a liar. And yeah, you know, you're just not getting it. And you're not getting it for an obvious reason. Because you have this mushy, vague notion of reality. And you don't really take responsibility for what the real game is, what's really paid for our existence. We exist at the expense of the entire biosphere. The biosphere creating our pure water, our clean water, and our clean air, and all that stuff. There's a whole biosphere creating what we're living on. And it's being tormented. The 8 little lion cubs are being torn to pieces alive. They're being tortured. The 30,000 sea turtles, the 20,000 octopuses, the huge attrition that exists in nature. I don't know how many tuna fish die in the first week of life, but it's probably a huge number. Salmon lay zillions of fucking eggs. I mean, lots and lots. 99% of those eggs, those little babies, will be murdered. You think that's a good system. I think that's an insane rubbish system. Child molestation and murder, never a good system. A system made of child molestation and murder can't possibly be a winning system. And you fucking suck to use this weak-ass bullshit to defend it. To keep putting your quarters in the kill machine. Fuck you, cunt. Fuck you. Get what you fucking deserve. Get what you fucking impose. Get the worst of it because you deserve the worst of it. The worst your fucking machine that you're putting the quarter in. Get the worst it produces because you've earned it with your stupid fucking quarter. You fucking asshole. Now it's enough of a video. I hate fucking people. Dumb motherfuckins. Just, big brain. Oh, we have a big brain and our big giant fucking skull and all the big fucking neurons are all big and big giant blah blah blah, and you can't think at all straight. You can't do fucking 2 + 2 fucking math. You're all so fucking dumb.